Today's guest is Hannah Lewis, who is a friend of mine and someone I met when we were both at a retreat in Dea Mallorca, an astrological spiritual retreat. And Hannah was one of those people that you're just completely drawn to because she has the most beautiful, calming energy in a group, and she's so self-possessed, just a wonderful presence. We became really good friends. She is one of the people from the retreat that I know that I'm going to be in touch with for the rest of my life. And she is a wonderful person. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, Hannah. And funnily enough, I feel like I know you at a kind of deep soul level, but actually know very little in terms of the facts that you would know about a friend.
Totally.
So this podcast is going to be like me learning about you. And Hannah lives in Finland at the moment. So this is why we are chatting remotely. So Hannah, welcome to the Every Muse podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm excited. This is my first podcast. And it's the first time we've seen each other. So I'm excited for that.
Post-retreat.
Post-retreat. Sorry, yes. And I think it's so true. We kind of went straight into the deep end of the friendship, which I love, because I love being silly or deep and nowhere in between.
Yeah. And I think because of the workshops as well, they were deep and they were things that you wouldn't really, nothing was small talk. Everything was, about life and ourselves and our fears and our hopes and our dreams. And I realized that actually I have so much time for those kinds of conversations and so little time for the other kinds of conversations that people are having these days,
Yes, I totally agree.
Okay. So Hannah, tell the listeners and me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am Hannah. I am an Australian living in Finland, which I think is quite a unique quality of mine. I'm a very outgoing introvert, which I think also confuses people. And I'm a mother of two. I'm a wife. I'm a sister, a friend. And that's me. And I'm in my late 30s, which I think I'm really loving, actually. So it's a bit about me, the basics.
When we were at the retreat, I felt like everyone was on their own journeys, and it was so nice to kind of connect wherever we were at. Everyone was kind of interested in each other's journeys and where they were at. And I feel like everyone was looking for something, perhaps a shift or some kind of breakthrough. What was that for you? Why did you go on the retreat?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a bit of my backstory can answer that. So I've always been super career driven. I wasn't even certain I wanted to have kids, but I met my amazing partner, Andy, and realized I did want that. But I've always remained very career driven. And this opportunity came to move to America, and it was for my dream company. This company that I have admired for my whole career. I've followed the company, done all their courses, read the founder's book. I had drunk the Kool-Aid. So I got my dream job doing exactly what I wanted to do, the exact company I wanted to do it for. And I didn't love it. So that made me question, what do I want to do with my life as far as career goes? And also living in America, it felt at odds with my values and what's important to me. So I had that question of, where do I want to be in the world? What do I want to be doing? And that realization kind of happened over 6 months. And during that 6 months, I had lots of people in my life have bouts of illness, accidents, and it got me thinking, how do I want to spend my time and who do I want to spend it with? So lots of really big questions.
Yeah.
And also, my daughter became this age, like she was 5.5 during this period, and she was asking me lots of big questions too. So I started to answer them slowly. But during that, I got this notification for the retreat. And I thought, I don't have any of the answers, but going to Spain for a week and, you know, doing some spiritual stuff and some hiking and yoga and creative stuff, I was like, I need to go there. So I booked the retreat at a moment of having lots of questions and not a lot of answers. But the year between booking the retreat and going to the retreat, I had been working a lot on answering those questions, but it was kind of a nice putting a ribbon on those answers at the retreat. And I think things happen when they're supposed to happen. And if I had gone to the retreat at that moment when I booked it, I probably wouldn't have got as much out of it. So it all worked out. And I think I was just looking for reassurance I was on the right path, some time and space just to think, because being a full-time working mum in America, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I had no time to think about it. I was either at home with my kids or at work, deep into clients' problems, or I was at the gym just making myself strong to keep up with my kids. So I didn't have a lot of mental capacity or space to actually think, what am I interested in? What do I want to do? Because I had my dream job and there was nothing terrible about it, but I just thought, I don't want to do this for the next 40 years. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it was kind of really freeing to mentally step off the corporate ladder. But I thought, what am I stepping onto next? So I think that was the big question for the retreat for me. And I think figuring out also friendship as well. I think I have made some great choices with my family, and I knew I wanted to make changes with my career. And I moved back to Finland as well. So I've been jumping around the world, and that impacts friendship. But one of the great things is it's a new opportunity to kind of think, I'm moving back to Finland. Who do I want to spend my time with? What type of people do I want in my life? And yeah, that's kind of what I was figuring out at the retreat as well.
Yeah, because we change, don't we? And there's these shifts inside. And I mean, maybe you're not meant to be friends with the same people that you were friends with since you were 5, because maybe they're meant to make new friends and you're meant to make new friends. And that's what I'm discovering, is that it's never too late to make new friends, because you see people on social media and it's like these girl groups and everyone's known each other forever. And it's like, actually, I don't necessarily have that, but I have a collection of wonderful people that I know and that I can have deep, meaningful conversations with that make me feel seen and heard. And I mean, that's, I think, what I value now in friends.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I actually listened to this great podcast the other day about friendship and the analogy of having space for people. So you have one person that you can sit in a bath with, you can have 3 or 4 people you can sit in a jacuzzi with, you have maybe 20 people you can have for a pool party, and then there's the 150 people you can go to a water park with. And I think being a foreigner living as far away as possible from where I grew up, naturally friendships are going to change. So people that were in my jacuzzi are probably more in the water park just because of the distance from Australia. And yeah, I think, being in a jacuzzi with someone is a very intimate experience.
Yeah.
And I only want people who make me feel good and who are rooting for me and I'm rooting for them, and being really intentional with who I'm doing that with. And I think when you're constantly trying to hold a water park full of people in a bathtub, it doesn't work.
No.
So I think it's totally normal to kind of recategorize people as they're old friends or they're good friends that I can spend time with when I'm in Australia, but they're not part of my daily life right now. And I think that's hard to grapple with because I think the narrative in our culture around friendship is, yeah, you have this girl gang, you have a best friend. And I think when you don't have that, you question, like, is what I have good enough? Or is there something wrong with me if I don't have one best friend? And I think what I've realized over the past 18 months is there's nothing wrong with that. And I like that I have friends from different groups or different parts of the world, and you can pick up where you left off with them rather than trying to force having like a girl gang or like a Sex and the City style, friendship group.
Yeah.
And I think if people have that, that's great. But if you don't have that, that's great too.
Yeah. I always thought about Sex and the City. I was like, how do you have time every day to meet at the same bar and discuss everything for 2 hours straight? It's insane. It's intense.
Yeah.
I think we listened to the same podcast, by the way. Was it?
I think so. You put me onto that podcast.
Yeah. I love that analogy about the jacuzzi.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It does. Yes. It really does. I was like, this is actually normal. The way that my friendships are normal, and it's actually normal to feel this way and not feel guilt about it. And actually, the other thing you said about having your corporate dream job and meeting all your goals and achieving everything that you wanted to achieve and it not feeling the way you thought it would feel. I'm finding that a lot of people actually feel that way because in your 20s, you're not thinking about this. You're kind of just hustling and pushing and trying to get to where you think you need to go in order to feel happy. And then you get there and then you're like, right, well, I've got there now. Why doesn't it feel how it's meant to feel? And so then you look for something else. And it's only when you stop and actually say, okay, well, clearly this isn't working, this nonstop, like setting a goal and getting there. And I need to kind of sit down and slow down and reflect. And I think more people are now doing that in their 30s, like slowing down and finding themselves. And I used to think back when I was 20, like in my 20s, I used to think when people used to talk about finding themselves or slowing down, I used to be like, God, like these people, they just keep talking about finding themselves. I know who I am. I don't need to find myself. But now I get it, completely get it. And what you said makes so much sense because this is so much toxic productivity that we're just used to. We're not used to slowing down and asking ourselves the questions that we all should be asking.
I totally agree. And I think achieving a goal feels great. That dopamine hit, I always write my goals down on paper. So like scratching it off feels great. But when you're constantly tying your self-worth, well, from my experience, tying my self-worth to that scratching off, you kind of become addicted to never feeling okay with where you are. So I was always thinking, well, I did that, time to add 5 new goals. And it's exhausting. And feeling connected to my body and resting was never on that list of goals. But what last year taught me with some friends and family becoming sick is that journal full of goals doesn't mean anything if you're not well and you're not resting and you're not in the moment. And if you don't know who you are, you just associate who you are with what you do. It's not healthy. So I think it makes sense that we're conditioned to achieve and be productive. And I'm so glad that people are realizing that's not healthy and stopping to reflect. As you said, I think it's a trend, and maybe a trend that previous generations didn't have the privilege of experiencing.
Yeah.
But I think we're all waking up that it's not the best way to live. And I think also economically, having a nice salaried job would set you up for life, but that's not the case so much anymore. So I think that pressure also puts us in a pressure cooker to think, well, how do I want to spend my life?
Yeah. It's funny that you use the word waking up, because that's how it's felt for me as well. You kind of, when this happens, you're awake, you feel awake, and everything sort of feels, I call it living in the raw. You feel quite sensitive to everything, and it feels like someone's like taken all your skin off and you can just literally feel the whole world. For me, it was really jarring when it happened. It wasn't like a slow awakening. It was very quick. And I feel like you've been on your own journey of self-discovery. What has that felt like for you in your body?
In my body, it has felt, it's been a slow process for me, actually. So I don't think there's a right or wrong or better or worse, but it's been slow. And it's just been a process of listening to my body, like how I feel in my gut making certain decisions, how I feel when I wake up, how I'm feeling when I go to bed, and giving myself permission to feel my feelings, which I'd never done before, which I think would surprise some people because I'm quite opinionated and come across quite confident, which I think I am in some areas, but I didn't trust myself to kind of feel my feelings. So that has felt really awkward and uncomfortable and really liberating as well, I think. Yeah, just giving myself permission to have a bad day and even say to my partner and kids, like, I woke up on the wrong side of bed. I'm just not feeling it today. And that being okay. So I think it's been liberating and uncomfortable, but great to learn living in my skin again and learning what triggers me and what makes me feel comfortable. And I cheat a bit because I wear an Oura ring. So I kind of biohack my way through that as well. So yeah, it's been a slow process with lots of different tools and lots of unlearning habits from the first, 30, 31 years of my life. So I'm being patient and it's still a work in progress. But yeah, it feels great.
What are you unlearning?
I think brushing things under the rug or having this attitude of, oh, it's all going to be okay, and onwards and upwards. And I think there's nothing wrong with the optimism.
Yeah.
But when there's only space for optimism, there's no space for negative feelings. And what I have learned from my kids, I've learned a lot from them, but what I respect about kids is they have these big feelings, tantrums, and they're not fun to deal with. But once they've let it all out, they just keep moving and they're happy again. And even animals do that.
Yeah.
So after an animal's been chased by a lion and survived, they shake it off. And I think just learning what a nervous system is and what activates it, what calms it down, and just knowing that if I don't let out my feelings, I'll hold on to them.
Yeah.
So I think I have just learned for 30 years to hold it all in and move onwards and upwards. But that'll catch up with you.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think when your kids see you hold space for your own feelings and feel those feelings, it gives them permission to grow up and feel their feelings too. Because obviously as a kid, you're doing it anyway, but I think we learn somewhere along the way that it's not okay to. But I think what you're doing is just showing them that actually it's actually normal to have a bad day and to accept that you're having a bad day, and some days aren't your days.
Exactly. One of my old colleagues, about a year ago, during this metamorphosis phase, I was doing research for a project and it was about coaching. And he was sharing some of his wisdom, and he said that, parenting is a great analogous context for coaching. And he said 90% of parenting is modeling your behavior that you want to see. And I was like,
yeah.
And it makes sense and it's common sense. but I probably wasn't practicing what I preach. So I think that has just really stuck in my mind. And I think about it every day. So if I want my kids to be emotionally intelligent and open and empathetic, but I'm not practicing those things, like they're never going to be like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think parenting is all nurture. I think it's nurture and nature. So, yeah, I think modeling how I want them to be and also giving room for them just being who they're going to be is really important. So I can't expect them to tidy their room if mine's messy. And the same goes with emotions. I can't expect them to be kind to others if I'm not kind to them.
Yeah. It shows you what a big responsibility parenting well is.
Yes. Yeah, I have this comment might seem insensitive to anyone that's having fertility issues, and I don't mean it to be, but I think overall having a kid is easy, not for everyone.
Yeah.
But raising good kids is hard. So I think I equate it to like a marriage. Like organizing a wedding is easy. Having a healthy marriage is the hard part. So I think, raising kind people is the biggest responsibility that I feel, at least.
I mean, the fact that you're even conscious about your parenting style says a lot about you. And I know you're a wonderful mother. If you could go inside your kids' bodies and kind of experience their childhood, what feelings would you hope that they're having right now? You know, what do you wish for their childhood?
I want it to feel secure and safe. And I want it to feel silly and playful as well. And they can both work hand in hand, but like me, one is like deep and serious, and the other part is just fun and playful. And I don't think kids have enough of that these days, or they're thrust into adulthood too early. So I want to make sure our children have a childhood for as long as possible.
Yeah, and you'd go on adventures with them, which I love.
Yes, I was quite determined. Again, I mentioned I wasn't sure I wanted to have kids before I met Andy. And I've always been a big traveler, very goal-orientated.
Yeah.
So when I had my kids, I was determined, like, yes, my life will change, but not everything needs to change. I still want to travel. I still want to see the world. I still want to work. And I hadn't seen many examples of that. So I thought I'll just be my own example and do this in a way that feels good for Andy and I, and not in a way that feels comfortable for everyone else. And travel with kids is great. It's exhausting. It's not a retreat in Spain, but the way they see the world is so refreshing. For example, we went on 2 trips the end of last year, and during both trips, one of them was looking at all the autumnal colours in New England, and the other one was to New York. And the highlight for the kids was the cupboards in our accommodation. I think...
Why? Did they think it was Narnia or something?
No, one of them was really big, so like, oh, this is cool. And one of them had one of those bag holder things. And they're like, oh, what's this thing? So I think they get excited about the little things, which I know adults should have, but I have learned not to, I guess.
Yeah.
So seeing what they get excited about, what they appreciate, I feel like is very grounding.
Yeah.
And I don't think they cared about the colours of the trees or New York. I mean, they were amazed by the big buildings, but they just loved the little things, like getting on the subway, which most people find like not very fun.
Oh, I love them.
But yeah, so I think I used to be a travel writer, so I used to stay at really lovely hotels and do the bougie side of travel, but I like having both. And kids let me be able to really see the minutiae of travel and observe things totally different to me. So I find travel with them is a lot more exhausting, but a lot more expansive, I think.
Mm. We're going to talk about your travel writing in a second, but what you just said reminded me of this quote I saw the other day. I can't remember whose it was, but it was about, if I died and I came back to life, I would notice things like, oh, it's a light switch. This is incredible. It's a light switch. Or, oh, there's a crack in a pavement. Or I've never seen such beautiful cracks. And the fact that people were talking about having to die and come back to see the world anew, but actually kids, that's exactly how they see the world. Everything is a miracle. Everything is a phenomenon.
Absolutely. And the kids have toys, but they're more interested in a pair of pliers or rubber bands or so they have this appreciation for the little things teamed with wild imaginations.
Yeah.
And we're all born with that, but we just become so used to PowerPoint presentations and constantly having that dopamine hit of bigger things, exciting things, rather than appreciation for the little things.
Yeah. So Hannah, everyone, is a travel writer. She has an Instagram called @HannahIsInHelsinki, which is wonderful and full of beautiful, beautiful shots of Finland and videos about what it's like living there. And it's just the most heartwarming, lovely aesthetic page. So everyone should go follow. But Hannah, you tell me about being a travel writer. How did you get into it?
I've always loved travel. My best friend in primary school was half Swedish, so she would show photos of her travels, and her family was quite different to the other families in my community, a bit more open-minded maybe. So that was kind of one avenue of like being intrigued by the world outside of Australia. And I also think being Australian, we're so far away from everything. So this intrigue of like the other parts of the map that felt so far away. And then I went overseas a few times and just loved it and just really intrigued by how other people live, types of foods they eat, all the cultural experiences you get when you travel. And I was moving from Brisbane to Sydney, and I wanted to start a blog because I was in marketing and comms at the time. And I thought, blogging's this new thing. Now it feels like an archaic thing, but at the time,
it's coming back.
Coming back. Everything comes back. Low-rise jeans and blogging. It's like in season right now. I might blog again, but I'm not going to wear low-rise jeans.
Yeah, I was just thinking, please no to the jeans. But yeah.
So I thought, what's this all about? I've always liked writing, and I always loved food too. And people would always ask me, where should I eat? Where should I travel? So I was kind of doing the work anyway. So I thought, why not put all my tips and suggestions on a blog? It might help me get a job. I'll learn something new. So that's how it started. And it was originally called Tales of a Truffled Pig. And it was just reviewing restaurants.
Yeah.
And then I started to do more travel and called it Tales and Trails. And the more I put out into the world, the more opportunities came my way. So I was working full time, but had this as a very solid side hustle. So I would go on some media trips, or I would just do my own travel and would get to stay at amazing hotels and have these amazing experiences. And I think that was a big lesson as well, that ideas are easy, but executing ideas is hard. And I wouldn't say blogging was super difficult, but it required discipline and consistency and vulnerability, even though I was reviewing restaurants, but putting stuff out in the world, you open yourself up to ridicule. And I think some people probably did make fun of me, but other people were super supportive. So I loved it. until I didn't love it anymore. I think that was also a lesson that writing for all these publications was great, but then I started to lose the creative side of writing. And I had this epiphany moment of doing a listicle about the 10 best Indian restaurants in Sydney. And I was just struggling to come up with new adjectives for food. I was like, this isn't fun anymore. And I kind of just stopped. So I also moved abroad, had 2 kids, survived a pandemic, and now I'm finding inspiration again to share. And I have the time and agency to do that now too. And I've always loved creating videos. I rarely shared them, but I would always be in iMovie making videos. And now with how social media is, it's video based. So I just love doing that. And I think the past 5 years, I didn't share a lot, but I was constantly taking photos and videos. And I think it's like a visual journal of what we're doing with our life. I'm a bit feeling at odds with how to share my children online. I don't really want to.
Yeah.
But they're such a big part of my life that I'm not going to pretend I don't have them. But I'm going to kind of keep their journeys and personalities more private, but just share how we approach adventures and life as a family. So yeah, that's something I'm figuring out. But again, I think the more I put out into the world energetically or creatively, the more that comes back to me. And when I moved to Finland, I thought I want to create some space for new people to come into my life. And by sharing more on social media, I've actually made new friends and also just like get to observe funny people on TikTok and their comments.
Yeah.
And I think social media is bad for many reasons, but there's a really good side to it too. So I'm just enjoying that part of it again. And it feels good to create because those 5 years that I didn't do much on social media, I was trying to write some books. I had like 3 abandoned novels. It's just such a big task, which is also why I love it. But social media, you can like create a reel in 2 minutes and it's fun. And so I like both. Again, the kind of silly little reels and then like deep books about the human condition. So I like that I can have different outlets for my creativity.
You're the second person that's told me that in the space of 2 days. So I had Lauren Martin on the podcast yesterday, and she said that she just focused on her blog when the writing was getting too difficult, or like carrying on with what she was doing every day, putting it out in the world with the kind of hope, but also this knowledge that the right people will find it. And that's how she ended up getting her book deal. Because someone read her newsletter that went out every Monday, which at the time she was saying, like, I don't even know if my newsletter reaches people. Like, I sit here and I do it and I spend so much time on it. Who's reading it? But people are reading it and it's finding the right people. So she said, energetically, creatively, putting your work out there, it will come back to you. So, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I think I don't have ambitions of being a full-time influencer. I don't have ambitions of having a certain amount of views or followers. It is more of like an energetic act of putting stuff out there. And like on TikTok, this woman commented on some of my videos, and then I mentioned that I'm looking for a job, and then she reached out to me. We're having coffee next week. She invited me to a networking event on Tuesday.
Love that.
So I think I prefer those kind of connections rather than like 100,000 comments. So
100%.
I think people associate social media with millions of views and influencers when really it's a whole spectrum of what social media can provide. And I think I am living life so far away from people that I care about. It also allows me to see how their kids are doing or what they're doing with their life. So I think if you focus on the good things, social media can be great, but it can be terrible too. I mean, nothing's perfect and nothing's black or white. Everything's typically grey. So
you have lived in so many different countries. So Australia, you moved to Boston, then to Finland. I feel like I've also lived in a couple of countries and I feel like it's changed me. What do you think living in a different country brings you?
I think it brings perspective on how there's different ways to do things. I think culturally, where I grew up in Brisbane's a big city, but I was kind of in this bubble. There's kind of a few ways to do things. A few schools that you send your kids to, a few suburbs that you should live in, a handful of career paths you should take. And there's nothing wrong with that. It works for many people, and many people I care about and respect. But for me, moving abroad opened up. So I went to Finland, America, and back to Finland. And each time I've lived somewhere else, I have seen different ways to do things, whether that be parenting, socializing even. So in Finland, it's really common to socialize with your kids. But in America and Australia, it's usually like very separate from kids. And again, nothing wrong with that. But I get to kind of pick all the best bits from these different cultures and different ways of living. And I get to pick and choose what works for me. And I might do things totally different from any of the cultures I've lived in. But I think this notion of doing things the right way culturally is then debunked when you go to a different culture and they do things totally differently. And I think it's also changed who I am. I think I went back to Sydney recently and saw my friend and I said, "Oh, nothing's changed." And he's like, "Oh, you one of those people who moves abroad and then comes home and says, nothing's changed." And I'm like, yeah, I guess I have. But I think it's because I have changed so much. So the way I feel in places naturally feels very different.
Yeah.
And I used to cringe at people like me, but now I understand it's more of like an internal thing rather than a slagging off somewhere for not changing. So I also think it has changed my marriage a lot too. I think moving abroad with someone either makes or breaks a relationship because you have to be so on the same page, making massive decisions and starting over together. So you have to be great communicators, great compromisers. So yeah, I think it's a huge undertaking to move to a new country. And I have some people asking me like, "I'm thinking about doing it. Should I do it?" And I say, it's the best thing I've ever done, but it's not easy. So
Yeah.
I think when you're maybe doing a gap year or something as a backpacker, you might think, "Oh, I lived abroad for a year," but it's very different when you're ingraining yourself into a new education system or healthcare system or living in a place where the language is different to your own. So I think overcoming all those challenges also has changed me because I realize I can do hard things.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Makes you more resilient.
Totally.
Oh, and sometimes it's nice to come back home and know that things haven't changed. There's almost like this stability and comfort to it.
Yeah, it would be odd to move away and then come back and be like, where am I? Where are all these people? So there is a comfort in that.
Yeah.
And I think because I had been gone for so long from Sydney, I hadn't visited in 6 years and COVID had happened. I just expected that it would be different. But in reality, I was a totally different person than who I was when I left there.
You, at the retreat, you talked a lot about, one of the things you talked about was boundaries when it comes to self-care. And you were so open and honest about it. And you said something that it struck me, and I'm sure it struck a lot of other people. I'm going to read it. You said the people who react badly to you setting boundaries are the very people who benefit from your lack of boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so, I mean, it's perfect. It's exactly right. But I think it can be so hard to set boundaries, especially with the people that you historically don't have any boundaries with, right? Suddenly you're like setting boundaries with these people. What advice would you give to someone who wants to set those boundaries?
I think practice makes perfect, and I haven't perfected it. So
it's hard.
But I'm constantly practicing it. So I think starting small, and it might be just a boundary within yourself. So you might have a work colleague that's always asking you to do extra work or something, and just practicing saying no politely. And then I think once you build up that muscle of protecting your energy, making bigger boundaries with people that might hold a bigger space in your life is a bit easier. And I think starting with the really big people, maybe like a toxic family member or something, you don't have that muscle memory of practicing boundaries. Yeah. And I think also becoming a parent where a lot of my spare time evaporated. And I also realized I can't show up as a good parent if my cup is empty.
Yeah.
So I think just even before setting a boundary, notice how your body feels with spending time with people. If you walk away from a coffee with a friend, wondering if she's getting on her phone to like repeat what you shared or speak negatively about you, or if you just feel tired after that interaction, you start to build a list of like, who do I need boundaries with and who fills me up? Who should I actually create more space and time for? So I think that was what I started to do before setting boundaries. And I think a lot of the boundaries I set just internally. So I might receive invitations for a friend who emotionally dumps a lot or never asks questions about me, and I'm more like a quasi-therapist. And I find that particularly frustrating because I spend a lot of time and effort on doing the work to heal or to go to therapy, or whatever it is that works for you. So when other people don't and they want me to be that for them,
it's hard.
Internally, I can just say, I'm just going to stop prioritizing that friendship. I'm not going to reach out as much. I might not accept invitations as much, or I might only want to hang out with them when there's a bigger group and I don't have to absorb all that negative energy. So I think just setting boundaries internally and small steps is really important. And then also with the bigger conversations, which are a lot harder, is tricky, but I always do this cost-benefit analysis of if I don't do it, what will the cost be? And the cost will be my mental health and my energy.
Yeah.
And I think they're the two most important things. And learning to be selfish is something that has been a big learning curve for me. And I think if I don't take care of myself first, I can't show up as a good colleague, employee, parent, partner, friend.
Yeah.
So I think letting a toxic person consume too much of my energy means that all these other people who aren't toxic for me lose out. So I might be in a bad mood after dealing with them, or I might be in a negative headspace because I let them drag me into a drama or something. So I think realizing that hurting someone's feelings or making someone feel uncomfortable is their problem.
Yeah.
And you just have to take care of yourself first. And I think as a former people pleaser, that's a really hard thing to overcome. But what I'm realizing about people pleasing is when you try and please everyone, you don't please anyone. So it's actually a pointless endeavor. And I think that reframing of trying to keep the peace and trying to, just going with the flow. But then when I went with the flow too much, there would be like a buildup of driftwood of negative emotions, and there's no flow for me.
Yeah.
So it's been a learning curve, and it continues to be something that I have to practice and do, because people that don't respect boundaries, and I have quite a few of them in my life, will constantly push on the boundary. So it's not, if you have someone who's emotionally aware or respectful and you share a boundary, they might not like it, but they'll respect it.
Yeah.
But then there's other people who just do not want you to have boundaries, and they're the exact people that you need to have them with. So it's a kind of tricky situation, I think.
Yeah. And I think sometimes the narrative that person then spins about you once you've set a boundary is almost more triggering, because they're like, oh, she's like this, and can you believe that she told me she didn't want to meet me anymore? Or I think that it's just a tricky area all around, but so important.
Yeah, I had a situation like that recently where there was a bit of drama, and I just removed myself, and then I got quite worried about what those people might say to other people that I care about. But then I got this great advice that anyone that knows the perpetrator of the drama and anyone who knows both sides, will be able to use some logical thought and probably realize that maybe it wasn't that dramatic, maybe Hannah wasn't that rude, and they probably won't take it at face value. So I think that was an important lesson for me too, that people can think whatever they think about me, and that's on them and not on me.
Yeah. And I think it was the Olsen twins that said that no is a full sentence.
Yes.
Love that.
Yep.
Every time I need to set a boundary, I'm like, no is a full sentence. I think as women as well, especially, that we're trying to justify our reason for doing or not doing something a lot, mainly because probably we don't want people to think badly of us. But actually sometimes just saying no is completely fine. I can't. Sorry.
Exactly. I got this new book from Zoe Foster Blake. She's an Aussie, and she's owns a skincare brand, and she's a novelist, and I admire her a lot. And she recently said that you can say, no, I can't do this. It sounds great though, and I wish you all the best. Because she said if you say, no, I can't do this, the dates don't work, it invites someone to propose a new date.
Yeah.
So I think no is a full sentence, but you can also be positive and encouraging and appreciative of the invitation and kind, while still being very firm about your no.
Yeah. 100%. I think as women, we're multitudes. So we're, mothers and wives and career women and sisters. And I think we play so many different roles. And sometimes we're playing lots of those roles at one time. And sometimes we're just, in our mum era. What role or roles do you think you're playing the most at this time?
Yes, I love this question. For the first time in my life, I am just being a human. I think
I love that.
I am on a career break, which in a few months will turn into unemployment. But this is a very intentional time for me to not be working. 18 months ago in America, when I realized I need some space, I saved all my money. So this is a very intentional time for me to just read books, have coffee with friends, go to a museum, have a nap. And I am a wife of an entrepreneur who's building a business. So, that's the way I'm showing up. And I'm always going to be a mum, and I'm very hands-on mum. So I have this window during the day where I can just not put pressure on myself to achieve anything. And I think at the beginning of this time off, I was thinking, I've got to finish those books, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. And I realized that totally defeats the purpose of having this time off. So I'm just being me, and journaling a lot, moving my body. On days that I don't feel like moving my body, I'll have a nap, and I'm just resetting. because I think I've figured out what life I don't want. And I've got a few answers about the type of friends I want, but I still have a lot to figure out. So I have been generous to myself, to giving myself that time to figure it out, because as you said, life is long if you have the privilege of it being long. So I'm calling it my mini retirement, because I think retirement feels so long, so far away. So I'm just giving myself a break, and it feels great. And it's a very privileged position to be in. And it won't last forever, but I'm just enjoying it. And I would recommend it to anyone, just even if it's just a week of just taking time off for yourself and not booking a trip or not trying to do a big to-do list, but just having a proper break.
I mean, I love that answer. As I was asking you the question in my head, I was like, but why do we have to be anything? And then you answered, and I was like, exactly. I love that. Just be. You just want to be Hannah.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Soul. It's a kid's Pixar film, I think. And it's about your soul's purpose. And I was like, I don't have a life calling. And I was crying through it. I think my kids are like, Mom's having one of those days. And then, spoiler alert, the end of the movie is you don't need to have this one thing that you're going to be. You're just on this earth to make the most of it. And if making the most of it is having naps and reading good books and having a job that just pays your bills, that's totally fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, going back to that, toxic productivity mindset that we all seem to have.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. At the retreat, we also spoke a lot about our kind of personal creative projects. And I know you're a writer, and I mean, that completely tracks. I love everything you say. I'm sure I'll love everything you write. What makes you want to be a writer? Have you always wanted to be a writer?
I have. I think I'm not... Any first drafts of anything I write are so bad and messy that I've always thought I'm not a very good writer, even though I'm always been drawn to it. But I was always writing stories. I remember one I wrote for my grandma called Attack of the Killer Broccoli. And I would always say to my mum, I just want to write in Central Scare eating a baguette. And she's like, okay, that's weird.
Sounds pretty dreamy to me.
Yeah. So I think the desire's always been there, but the confidence hasn't been there. But, there's drafts and editing processes and people that can help you if ever there was something to be published. And I think doing the freelance writing about restaurants showed me the mechanics of you do have a support network as a writer who publishes things. So I don't need to put pressure on myself for things to be perfect. But yeah, I love it. I think I journal all the time as a way to process my feelings. And I think I've had a pretty wild childhood that I wouldn't recommend having, but I'm hopeful that those bad experiences can turn into good stories. Or even my good experiences can turn into good stories. And I think I read a lot because it helps me make sense of the world, even though I read fiction. But I think even fictional characters can be relatable. So it is a dream of mine to be a writer. I mean, I am writing. But yeah, I just love it. It makes me make sense of myself and make sense of the world and helps make sense of any challenges I've had. So it's quite therapeutic, actually, and cheaper than therapy.
No, I agree. And when you write something, I write in a blur. And when you revisit it, you're like, was that me? Was that me at that time? It almost forces you to confront all of the different states or moods inside you.
Yeah, and I think I keep all my journals and I go back to them, and it's quite therapeutic as well, because you go, you were struggling then, but look at you now. You haven't even thought about that in years. Or, you write about something good and then you go back and you're like, I should do that again. So I think it's great because sometimes I don't even recognize the person who was writing in those journals 4 years ago. So it also shows growth as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to get better at it. Actually, Hannah and I have a accountability practice where we share pencils when we've written that week, and I haven't sent you any pencils.
I know neither.
I'm sorry.
Well, this is a good motivation to start next week.
I will send you a pencil at some point. But
and I think that's also why I was so glad to meet you. And I think my friendship with you was probably the best thing to come out of the retreat, because 2 weeks prior, I made that mental decision to like create mental space for new, inspiring people to come into my life. And then there you were.
Hannah. I'm getting emotional. I felt the same about you. And actually, I tell very few people. I don't know why I do it, but I tell very few people about my dreams and my creative projects. But I felt completely safe telling you. And I felt like you received it and you saw it. You encouraged me. And yeah, I just think you're a wonderful person. And the fact, it's a testament to how wonderful you are, that someone who historically does not always feel safe telling people about their dreams and their hopes for the future. The fact that I felt that way means that you were very special, but you were also very special to me.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same way about you, because I think in Australia, I was very guarded and kind of always had some feedback along the years that I was quite cold. And I think I had to be, because I was going through a lot in my childhood, but then I'm very different these days. And when you told me that I had this really like warm energy, I was like, thank you. I've been working on that. So I feel like you really saw me for me. And that's really refreshing. And yeah, I was open with you too. And yeah, I'm just so glad to have found you as a friend.
Me
and
too.
Hopefully future collaborator.
Yes, can't wait. I can't wait. Putting that out in the universe. I just uncrossed my legs.
Yes.
I think you were self-possessed. I actually wanted to tell you this. Like, it felt like you knew yourself. And I think when you know yourself, you're not out there to prove anything. You're not out there to make anyone feel bad. You're not out there to judge. You're just there. You're observing, you're receiving, and you're giving back when you can. And that's what I felt from you. It didn't feel like you were trying to be anything except yourself, Hannah. And I think that's what I loved. And that's why I felt the warmth, because I felt like I was just Hannah. Like Hannah is safe. Hannah knows herself. So Hannah doesn't really need to put anyone down or discourage anyone, or it was this wonderful like self-possession that you had, which I'm not articulating well enough. But
no, I appreciate that, because I think my former self, which was a bit of a people pleaser, I'm like, is that person uncomfortable? And I have ADHD, so I'm like very sensitive to vibes. And I've been working with my amazing kinesiologist, and she's just said, just show up to places. Don't plan and think. And if someone's not engaging in the group, it's not your responsibility to do that for them. Of course, don't be unkind. But so I think I was putting a lot of the lessons I've learned over the years into that retreat. And that was one of them. It's like, I'm not responsible for the agenda. I'm not responsible for how others are showing up. I'm just showing up.
Yeah.
And it's quite freeing to not have that responsibility of constantly thinking about others, and just showing up and gravitate towards those that have good energy, like yourself and a couple of others, and not feeling the responsibility of everyone else.
Yeah. I was also going to say, and we might edit this out, depends on how I feel about it. But there were so many moments, I think, when you could have engaged in gossip, and there were moments when you could have engaged in negativity, and I could see you didn't. And by not doing that, you also checked other people in that moment and showed people that actually we don't have to do this. We don't have to have this kind of conversation. And I saw that happen, and I felt it, and I respected you so much in that moment. And I just wanted to tell you.
Oh, thank you. I think one of the best things about being a foreigner in Finland is we were able to enter this friendship group of these amazing people who have been so kind and generous, but they have this long history together.
Yeah.
And we're these new people, and I'm sure some of them have issues with each other or they might have dated each other. I don't know. And I actually love that.
Yeah.
Because my hometown is quite gossipy. It's like the economy is built on gossip there. And I realized I just don't like it. I think listening to friends vent, totally fine. But having moved to a place where I don't even know how to start gossip because I don't know people's history or anything, was so refreshing. And yeah, I just don't love it. And I mean, sometimes a little bit, but, you know, more about silly things rather than big things. And I also just think everyone's bringing stuff. Like everyone's entitled to have bad days. I don't need to know what the stuff is, but we all have stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I used to gossip a lot because I think I'm a good listener. So then people, and I realized that work in particular, it's not, you don't want to be known as the gossiper. So I think it's good to be in the know, but being the person that's always hanging out with the gossiper or being the person that says, oh, I heard this.
Yeah, it's not
who I want my kids to be. It's not who I want to be. But it's hard because gossip can be really fun and interesting.
But it's such an icky feeling after you've done it. It's such a, you're like, well, why did I say that? So yeah, I feel the same. I try not to do it. And
and I think the biggest gossipers are usually gossiping about people who they love and respect.
Yeah, or they want to be like.
So I think if you're gossiping about them, and now I'm here with you, you're probably going to gossip about me. So it's just not a redeeming quality. And I think if you have a problem with someone, vent to a confidant. And if that doesn't rid you of the negative feelings, talk to the person. But spreading stuff, it's not good.
No. Hannah, life lessons.
Well, I'm a work in progress. I think that's why I like reality shows, because it's kind of like I get my icky, gossipy, gross stuff as entertainment and not in my real life.
Sometimes on some of these shows, like I guess The Real Housewives, and someone's had like, you know, a horrible bitching session, and then they're friends after, or they've gone through this like arc of redemption where they realized and then they apologize, or, you know, things work themselves out. And you can really see someone go from like the negative parts of themselves to the positive. I root for those people. I love those people. The people that, you know, come off as really problematic and then have the best kind of over the season, you see them develop. Those are the people that I love to see on reality TV.
100%. And I think a quality that I'm really looking for in anyone that I come into or let people into my life is self-awareness. So not perfection, because no one's perfect, and not necessarily enlightened or although that would be nice. But people that are self-aware of how they're showing up and know what they're not so good at. And I really value that. So when people have that journey of realizing their flaws and working on them, I respect that so much.
Same. And that's all you can ask for, really. Just someone to take accountability and say, you know what, I didn't show up at my best that day, but I'm going to try and do better. You are a prolific reader. And Fran Lebowitz says the best writers are. So you're obviously going to be the best writer. But
I think I procrastinate from writing. It's research.
I mean, I think she does too. I think she wrote like one book and then she's like, I don't want to write anymore. I just couldn't write anymore. But that's all she needed, one book.
Okay, that's a good goal to have.
Yeah. What are you reading?
So I am reading Long Island Compromise, and it is so good.
I haven't heard about it. Tell me.
It's fantastic. So one of my favorite podcasters, Caroline O'Donoghue, who has Sentimental Garbage, she has mentioned it a few times. And then she had the author, Taffy Ackner Brodesser.
Yeah, Taffy Brodesser Ackner, yeah.
Yes, sorry.
No. She's great, yeah. She was on another podcast, but we'll talk about that later, but she's amazing.
Okay. So it's her book and it's brilliant. I haven't been this captivated by a book. I've lost a lot of sleep this week staying up too late reading it. And as Caroline said in the podcast, that all the characters are just bad and flawed. And in literature these days, she was saying that she thinks that everyone's making the characters too nice and like politically correct and too moral. And that's not great reading. So this is just, it's about a dysfunctional family. It's about trauma and the ripple effects that it has in your life, which, you know, coming from a dysfunctional family, I can really relate to. But it's fantastic. And her writing is so good. And I've read a lot of books recently that are full of subtext, which is great and it's clever. Sometimes I just want to not have to read and then think, is that what they meant? Or is that what happened? So this book is just, it's fantastic.
Oh, can't wait to read it. What's your favorite quote, Hannah?
So I don't know who said this or where I heard it, but I wrote it in my phone notes about 4 years ago. And it is, my life lived is my life's work. And I just loved that. Just living.
Without any expectation of anything more, just living.
Yeah. It stuck with me. And I'm glad you asked because it's kind of the reminder I need right now.
I think it's the reminder everyone needs.
Yeah, true.
Oh, Hannah, I could talk to you forever. We actually have another 8 minutes. So we can just these are all my questions, but we can chat.
Can I ask you what you're reading?
What am I reading right now? I am reading Evenings and Weekends by Asheen McKenna. I think I said that right.
Screenshotted that.
I might have been wrong. But it's great. It's for my book club.
Okay.
On Wednesday. So I actually have a lot of reading to do before then. But it's
add it to the list.
Yeah, add it to the list. And another great book is I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. It's super popular here. She's doing really well. But it's like an inner monologue of a woman that's obsessed with a man and in a toxic relationship. And it's like all of her thoughts, the insane, irrational, the insecure,
Love that.
when she's stalking him and his wife or his ex-girlfriend on Instagram because she's the other woman, and the kind of delusions that she might be facing in that moment. It's so honest and raw, and it just punches you straight in the gut. It's brilliant. It's really good.
I love that kind of writing, because I think even Dolly Alderton's Good Material is about a breakup, and it's a man's perspective, but he just acted so pathetically. But I could relate to it because most of us are pretty pathetic when you go through a breakup.
Yeah, we are.
And I love those like characters that you go between relating to or being like, oh, you're being so ridiculous. Because that's the human condition, right? Like we do things that are really silly when we're not, in our right mind because we're going through heartbreak. Or in my book that I'm reading now, they're a very privileged, rich family, but they have these really big problems. And you can empathize with that because they've been through some trauma. So money and privilege doesn't mean happy life. And I think in the society we live in now, we kind of have these polarizing views. And I saw that in America a lot. It's like, if you're this, you're that. Or if you have that, you can't feel that. And I just don't think that's natural or human. Like, we're all complicated and have crazy thoughts.
Yeah.
So I love writers that kind of open up that side of us, because I think we all have it in us and we don't often share it.
Yeah.
But knowing that other people have it through books is very comforting for me, 100%. At least.
Same. You feel less alone.
Totally.
It's been an absolute treat having you on my podcast. And this is going to be one of my favorite episodes. This already is one of my favorite episodes.
Oh, you're the best.
I mean, I can't wait for the world to listen to it. And you are an absolute star. And I'm so blessed to have you as a friend.
I feel exactly the same way. I feel so energized by this conversation. So it's been a pleasure.
Oh, bye. Wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, please do like, subscribe and follow so you can get updates. But it also means so much to me, and it makes a real difference to the episodes and the guests that we can bring on. Thank you.